really to get like very rudimentary, I think that misuse often comes down to using it at the wrong time, using it for the wrong intention, or just using too much of it or using it for too long. So when we unpack this, using it at the wrong time, I mean, this kind of coincides with using it for the wrong intention. In the case that you're using it in contest prep, the primary goal is really muscle retention. We're preventing muscle wasting. Realistically, there's a lot of scenarios where someone will feel as if they built muscle. And I can tell you, like, one of the best ways to look like you built muscle is by losing body fat if you already have muscle underneath. It happens all the time where people will be at a very healthy, very modest body fat, yet they strip down, maybe 5 pounds, and people begin to comment like, oh, you look like you added some weight. You look like you built some muscle. It's just the fact that body fat does skew that visual appearance. I'm kind of getting a side point, but realistically, in the case of a contest prep, it is used to drive training performance. It is used to artificially inflate the look that you bring to stage to bring something that's a little fuller. I can say last time I competed, I got on the stage at like 117 at about 5'4", and I was very flat, very wispy, very praying mantis-like. And I did a show a few weeks later with Anavar, with a proper carb load, with little to no cardio, and I was as full as I could be. And I got on stage at 124-ish. It worked, but to the extent that it could work. I didn't have enough muscle for it to make this, 10-pound difference, but it is something that a lot of people use towards the tail end of their contest prep, which I don't necessarily think is misuse. Really, when I start looking at misuse, it's in the state that training performance doesn't really need to be upregulated. Like, you just started a fat loss phase, and this is where even like sitting down to record this, like I find myself going back and forth. I'm like, well, like, yeah, even with TRT, I probably lost some muscle this prep. There's some degree of muscle loss that probably will occur. And, theoretically, could you put an Anavar for the entirety of the the whole prep, just to make sure that everything is like just tipped off? Sure. But it doesn't come for free. There's a cost associated with that. And that's what worries me. That's what worries me about like you guys listening to this, you ladies who are competing, who are getting ready for shows, is that some of y'all have had in 5 to 10 milligrams of Anavar just to sustain a really extreme diet because you had a lot of weight to lose. And that's not shade. I started my diet at 152. I am like a little over 132 right now, and I still have a little bit to go. And I can say it, does make sense now. It's the more time we have to spend getting down, the higher risk there is of muscle loss. And if we don't have anabolics to really preserve that can be a bitch. That can be something that then puts us in a position where maybe we're more likely to lose muscle. But all that to say, even if you have a lot of body fat to get off, the answer isn't just simply putting in Anavar and crushing yourself. There are much, I would say, wiser approaches that don't expose you to that same risk of virilization. Now, when we look at misuse, using it for the wrong thing, using it as a fat burner, using it as a hardener, I think largely most women are going to find that once they put in Anavar, and I mean, I'm talking, I have women with tiny, little itty bitty waist, and they find that once it goes in, they start to feel not distension, but fullness in their abdomen. And the best way I can explain this is we can't be selective with the way we lose body fat. We can't be selective with the receptors that Anavar targets. And I know for me, I'm very sensitive and I would say aware of shifts in my stomach. And I have good musculature in my abdomen, but pulling intramuscular glycogen, pulling water into these muscles, it's not like I can say when I have Anavar in place, oh, just go to my glutes, don't go to my legs, don't go to my core, go to my shoulders. We want it in the shoulders. And it's something almost every time that I've had it in, I've definitely felt a fullness that I'm not used to. I felt not necessarily a bloat again, but just thickness. And as soon as it's removed, that goes with it. I find that a lot of people who are using it recreationally are unprepared to experience that aspect of it, that fullness, and especially ones that are very sensitive to changes in scale weight overnight. I mean, like, you're looking at, a 2 to 5 pound increase, and like that can be very off-putting if like seeing it go up 1 pound is upsetting for you. So being in a fat loss phase, having unrealistic expectations, I think that's a shame. But also just looking at it primarily as like, what is it good at? It does work on fat loss pathways, but very minimally. And that's not something that like I feel is at all responsible to, like, as educators in the space, to be like, oh, Anavar works on this pathway and it can do that. Like, I feel like that's just misleading people and encouraging misuse. So shame on you if you're doing that. And I'm not really talking about anyone specific. I know in the last couple years, there's been this heightened growth around like people just like looking into these compounds, being like, this is what it does, and like latching on to one aspect without context, and then, making a video about it, putting it out there, and not realizing that like you could very well be responsible for people now using this drug in this way. And I just feel like if you're going to talk about drugs, like, there is a responsibility to depict it accurately, to not oversell it. And if you are like promoting it in some way, like being really honest, like, okay, what about the person who has a negative experience about, in the use that was, I don't know, catalyzed by the information that you provided. I'll digress. So fat loss, it's just not the best use for it. And like, that's where if the goal is fat loss, I would much rather use something like Clen, T4, T3, even growth hormone. I would use something that's going to actually encourage lipolysis, something that is going to do a good job of better creating a deficit. The other aspect to this is Anavar being labeled as a hardener, it being used as something to dry you out. And realistically, there isn't a pharmacological pathway that Anavar, or really any oral anabolic, directly makes you look harder. And this is, again, where we have to be really careful when we're talking about it. I've caught myself several times where I'm like, oh, like I look really dry today, or I look really tight. And I have to think about it. I'm like, okay, it's not because of the inclusion of one variable or really the modification of one variable. If anything, putting in Anavar, yes, it's going to help you maintain muscle, it's going to support performance, but that look is a consequence of really a combination of low enough body fat, lower cortisol, low water, and full glycogen, not just the anabolic, not Anavar in itself. And that's where the same rule of thumb applies to using any of these fat loss agents. Like, they can cause transient shifts in the composition, how you look. But realistically, the thing that's going to allow you to look hard, allow you to look dry, is one, having as little body fat as you need to achieve the look that you're going for, which could vary drastically depending on what that look is. And then two, having enough muscle, making sure that once you peel back the layers, you're not left with very like wispy, faint tie-ins. And like, in my mind, I can think back to the times that I have gotten super lean and I've like loved, some aspects of the look, but then I've been like, oh, like if I had more muscle, this would look really wild. Like, that would absolutely enhance this physique. So it comes down to a combination of those two things. Also being in a state where, you're able to sleep, you have low cortisol, you're not like having these weird GI shifts that are muddying that look.